In our previous video, we discussed what the future for Ahsoka could hold, given that we now know she not only survived up to the point of A New Hope, but the entire galactic civil war itself. But there still remains one topic that we haven't discussed, given the reveal in the Rebels series finale that Ahsoka is alive even after Return of the Jedi. Will Ahsoka attempt to train Luke during the timeline of the original trilogy? In this video expose, I will answer this question and discuss some of the evidence that exists within the current canon that suggests that Ahsoka should not attempt to train Luke during the original trilogy, thereby interfering in his path. I'll start by saying that I don't think it's likely that we'll see Ahsoka attempt to train Luke during this period, if we define training as guiding Luke in his understanding of the Force. I won't go over every point made in yesterday's video, but it's sufficient to say that it's very likely that we're going to see Ahsoka undergo a significant transformation following her journey undertaken on Malachor. Everything that's come out following the series finale, particularly from Filoni, suggests that once Ahsoka returns to the temple on Malachor, she'll experience a transformation that symbolizes a journey from death back to life, almost a rebirth of the entire character. Everything about Ahsoka's change in appearance in the final episode of Rebels is a testament to this significant transition, and specific to her journey. Although we don't yet know exactly what this journey requires of Ahsoka, we do know this. Ahsoka isn't seen again following her return to Malachor, roughly 3 years before the events of A New Hope. She doesn't return to assist her friends in the Ghost Crew at the Battle of Atollon or with the liberation of Lothal, which would span roughly 2 years since she emerged from the World Between Worlds on Malachor. Further, given her absence from all major events during the original trilogy regarding the rebellion within the current canon, I believe it's safe to assume that Ahsoka likely doesn't re-emerge until sometime close to her appearance in the Rebels finale to begin her mission to find Ezra. Her absence from the rebellion, and specifically her friends within the Ghost Crew, is no minor detail. We learned in the Ahsoka novel that Ahsoka joined the rebellion through Bail Organa only a year after Order 66 and the rise of the Galactic Empire, using her efforts to assist those who needed it the most. Therefore, her absence from the major events of Season 3 and Season 4 of Rebels strongly indicates one of two possibilities. First, Ahsoka's journey on Malachor, inclusive of the fact that she may have also been in a way trapped upon the planet, could be a lengthy one that caused her to be incapable of returning to the rebellion even if she wanted to. This would make sense given the important transition that Ahsoka will ultimately make through this journey. Or second, the journey beginning on Malachor may pull Ahsoka away from the greater events of the galaxy altogether, almost in the same way that the Bendu separates himself from it all, despite the fact that he's Force sensitive. Ahsoka may have committed herself to a greater purpose or truth as a result of her transcendence on Malachor, pulling her away from the galactic civil war altogether. Either way, I believe both possibilities make it extremely unlikely that Ahsoka will attempt to locate and train Luke during the timeline of the original trilogy. All things are pointing to the fact that Ahsoka's journey on Malachor will not be a simple one, and will involve the character going through a significant change. She may simply be involved in other important things at this time, or, as difficult as it is to do given her connections to these major events and characters in the original trilogy, we may have to start looking at Ahsoka like the Bendu, that is, as someone who may have found a new path to dedicate themselves to. Nonetheless, I believe the story of Ahsoka during the original trilogy will be one focused upon her journey, and not one involved with Luke or any part of the Galactic Civil War. But I think there's something even more important to be touched upon here. Through the main Star Wars comic, the canon has established the fact that Luke's attempts to become a Jedi and learn the ways of the Force between Episode 4 and Episode 5 were taken extremely slow out of fear of him succumbing to the dark side. In the Ashes of Jedha arc, recently revealed in the Star Wars comic, we saw Luke travel to the moon of Jedha not long after the Battle of Yavin, in search for a new rebel base. Once on Jedha, Luke met a man named Cholko G, a member of the Brotherhood of the Beatific Countenance and an aspiring member of the Disciples of the Wills, both being Force-worshipping religious orders native to the moon. Desperate to learn more about the ways of the Force and continue his training as a Jedi, Luke agreed to follow his new friend to a shrine of the cult of the Central Isopter to find answers, which was once the place of a great temple upon Jedha. Eventually, Luke and Cholko reached the shrine and gazed down into the abyss in an attempt to attain knowledge and wisdom. Ultimately, while Luke was able to pull himself away from the abyss, understanding that there was too great of a risk to lose himself in attempting to find knowledge regarding the Force in this way, Cholko wasn't as lucky and gave in to the dark side. Driven to madness, Luke was then forced to kill his friend after he was attacked. The primary lesson from the arc, which is expressed by Luke, Cholko, and a member of the Central Isopter, is this. The time of the original trilogy is a perilous one defined by the dark side. Despite the desire of individuals like Luke and Cholko wanting to learn more about the Force in an attempt to do good and dedicate themselves to the light, their efforts to do so unilaterally and blindly represents a significant risk, as the lure of the dark side is ever present. As Luke concludes himself, "I'm just blundering around in the dark. I'm risking everything. I could end up like Cholko. I have to be patient. I may never be a Jedi. I have to be okay with that." Lastly, as Luke learns from one of the Central Isopter members, the road Cholko and you were on leads only to madness. Without a true guide, you will fall. This is a perfect setup for why Obi-Wan waited 3 years before sending Luke to learn from Yoda, and also connects nicely with Obi-Wan and Yoda's words for Luke as he races off to save his friends in Episode 5. With the time of the original trilogy being defined by the dark side and thus an extremely dangerous time for Luke. The main takeaway here and why it's important for our current topic is this. We know that ultimately the lessons Luke receives regarding the Force and Jedi required Yoda to be his guide. This training under Obi-Wan and Yoda is specific to the ultimate path Luke travels and completes. We have the remnant of the Jedi Order teaching their last hope the ways of the Jedi, so that he could confront the Emperor and the dark side. If Ahsoka is even around at this time, that is, not undergoing her own journey, I believe that having her attempt to connect with Luke during the original trilogy would be a mistake, as it would interfere with the ultimate story taking place with Luke, Obi-Wan, and Yoda. It would introduce too much madness, to use a word from the Ashes of Jedha arc. But in my opinion, it would also be a disservice to Ahsoka as well. We know that Ahsoka isn't a Jedi, as made clear in the Ahsoka novel and in Rebels, and thus wouldn't have much to teach Luke in this regard. But I believe that Ahsoka connecting with Luke during the original trilogy would also interfere with the wisdom of the character, and any transcendence that she achieves as a result of her journey on Malachor. Just like she was smart enough to realize that she had to go back to her own timeline from the world between worlds, she should probably recognize that it's best to avoid Luke altogether, and allow him to walk his path with Obi-Wan and Yoda, similar to the way in which Qui-Gon never appeared before Luke. As Luke was taught on Jedha, Ahsoka just isn't the true guide for him during this period. After the Galactic Civil War, when we know that Ahsoka does return from her journey as seen in the finale, it could be a different story, with a possibility of the two characters interacting at some point during the roughly 30 years between trilogies. Ultimately, they might be too closely connected through Anakin to not have them eventually meet at some point. But given the potential for Ahsoka to go through a real transformation, which appears to be significant, it might be best to think of her as a Bendu type of character in relation to Luke. They're all part of the same galaxy, but have their own wisdom, abilities, interpretations of the Force, and goals, and don't necessarily have to interact with each other along the way, as they all walk their own paths separately. So there we have it, why it isn't likely that Ahsoka will attempt to train Luke during the original trilogy. We love making these videos, so why not subscribe for more fun Star Wars theories and discussions. Also, if you enjoyed the video, think about giving a like or leaving a comment. Or perhaps follow us on Twitter at SW Reading Club for updates regarding the channel. Or support the channel through Patreon for access to exclusive hangouts and book discussions. If not for me, for dangerous attempts to find knowledge.